Hello, and thank you for joining us for these PyCon Latam videos. Today we have with us Luciano Ramalho, who we're very happy is going to keynote for us at PyCon Latam 2021. My name is Katia Lira. I'm co-organizer of the PyCon Latams. And Luciano, thank you very much for your time and for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, Katia, for inviting me and for preparing this conversation.
Okay. So I think the first question should be, why do you like Python?
Well, I like Python because it's a very practical language. It's easy to do a lot of different things with it. It's very consistent. So if you learn some parts of it, then you start pretty much guessing how the other parts work because of how consistent it is. And I also think it's beautiful. And I think we don't talk too much about beauty in programming languages. And I think we should. Of course, aesthetics is always a matter of personal taste, is always a subjective matter. I cannot prove to you that Python is more beautiful than Perl. But I do see things in Python that I think are beautiful. This is very harmonious, the way the language works. Yeah.
Okay, and how did you started working with Python?
So I started working with Python in '98 when I was I started working with server-side web development in '94. And the language that I used at first was Perl. Then I used a little bit of Java. And Python for me was like the best of Perl and the best of Java without the worst of Perl and the worst of Java.
Yeah, agreed.
You know, yeah, it was because it was expressive and quick to do things like in Perl, but it was more organized like Java, and it was really object-oriented like Java. So I really liked the Python when I found it through a Perl mailing list, actually, in '98.
Okay, that's great. So I did some research on your background because I hadn't had the fortune to meet you personally, and I knew little about your work. And one of the things I kind of stood up for me is that you describe yourself as a stand-up programmer. Can you give me like a background on why is that?
Yeah, well, that's kind of so the story is that there's an old Mel Brooks movie called History of the World. And in the one part of the movie is in ancient Rome. And in ancient Rome, the character that Mel Brooks plays is a stand-up philosopher.
Okay.
So I thought it was funny to have a stand-up philosopher. So why not? You know, so you have stand-up comics, so you can have a stand-up philosopher, and I am sort of a stand-up programmer. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that I am funny. Sometimes I'm funny, and sometimes I am funny unintentionally. But
we all are.
Yes. But the main thing is that I think, you know, what I thought was, so how does stand-up comedy works? The comic prepares, you know, he carefully writes and rewrites, you know, many times the jokes, and then they rehearse it thousands of times, and then they get in front of people, and it seems like it's just flowing naturally, like an improvisation, but it's not. It's something that's super, you know, refined and rehearsed and worked. There's a lot of preparation. So I realized that the kind of programming that I like to do most is actually preparing like little bits of code to illustrate concepts. When I give a talk, or when I write a book, when I wrote my book, or when I taught and I still teach sometimes courses. So I like to take an example, think of an example that is interesting, and then refactor it and refactor it and refactor it until it becomes as elegant as I can make it, and as clear as I can make it, and simpler, as simple as I can make it, but also conveying the main point. And then I present, and people, oh, it's just a snippet of code, but it's not just a snippet of code. It's a snippet of code that was carefully,
Right.
refactored and designed, and so that's the idea of the stand-up comic. But people sometimes become disappointed because I'm not as funny as they expect.
No, but I could have never thought of that as to be the reason. I associated with you being quick on your feet and being able to reply or
that too. In the movie in Portuguese was this job description was translated as filósofo repentista, and repentista is like a repentist would be in English, but anyway, it doesn't exist, this word. Repentista is something from the traditions of the northeast of Brazil, where it's usually two people with guitars, acoustic guitars, and they sing, and it's kind of a duo, and so there's a lot of improvisation in that too, because it's like a challenge,
Right.
One of them sings a few verses and the other sings more verses. That's kind of a reply to the first one.
Okay.
And I like that too, but it also has the same characteristic as being something that sounds like they are improvising and that they are doing it live, but actually it was carefully rehearsed before.
Right, and you have to back it up with skills.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
I really like that. So what about your job, your day-to-day job? What do you use Python for?
So I work for ThoughtWorks, and ThoughtWorks is a global consulting company that's in 14 countries. It started in the US. And so we have most of our clients are big companies. Many of them are bigger than ThoughtWorks. But sometimes there are projects in Python and in other new languages. So one of the things that I do, besides sometimes being in projects with clients, I also do a lot of helping people, onboarding people. For instance, if there's a team that needs to work with Python or Go, which are languages that I know enough to teach, then I can help them with that. Recently, I helped onboarding a team of people from ThoughtWorks and from a client with Go. And I also, so I kind of keep my antennas, about looking at what are the next languages, because we already have a lot of people that are experts in Java and pretty much every language in the Java stack. But for instance, Elixir I think has potential. ThoughtWorks has done a few projects with Elixir around the world, and so I'm studying that. And the other thing that I do is ThoughtWorks likes me to speak at conferences, because that helps with our marketing, both as a consulting company that has things to say about technology, but also as an interesting place to work. I like to say that I was recruited by Martin Fowler through his books. And so I try to be sort of a recruiter as well when I go to conferences and I speak, and I have the ThoughtWorks logo in my slides, and I talk about how great it is a company to work for. It's a company that really values diversity from the start. It's not something that is new in ThoughtWorks. We've Rebecca Parsons, our CTO, has been our CTO for I think 20 years, and we have always had women in leadership positions at ThoughtWorks. So yeah, and now I'm super thankful, super grateful for ThoughtWorks, because they are supporting me as I write my book. So I put here this pile because I'm very proud of it. I finally collected all the 9 editions of the book.
They look good?
Yeah, the last one was the French edition that just arrived like a month ago. And
Okay.
so ThoughtWorks, the first edition, when I wrote the first edition, I did not work for ThoughtWorks.
Okay.
But now that I work for them, they let me devote a lot of my time to updating the second edition because, you know, hopefully it will also help promote the company. Yeah.
Also, I wanted to mention that I think Fluent Python is not in Spanish yet, right?
No, and I would love to see it in Spanish.
Yeah, me too.
If anybody that has contacts with a, a, a publisher in the Spanish-speaking world,
Okay.
I am willing to help make this happen. You know,
Okay.
I can be a reviewer, and I think we would have, you know, lots of people willing to help too. So
Yeah.
let's make this happen for the second edition, right? Because
Okay.
second edition is going to be ready. Hopefully, it's going to be completely released in print in the second quarter of next year.
Okay. So while we're on the topic of your book, what made you want to write this book?
So I've taught lots of courses about Python, and in those courses, most people were not people who are learning to program, but were people who already had experience programming in a different language. And so I got a lot of questions about, you know, can I do this, which I like to do in Java and Python,
Okay.
or how do I do this other thing that I like to do in PHP in Python? Questions like that, you know. And also working with teams, you often see that too. You know, people, maybe you have somebody that's maybe is already working with Python for several months or even years, but they do things in a way that looks like another language, you
Okay.
know. And so I had this course, I created this course that was called, in Portuguese, Python para quem sabe Python, which
Okay.
could be translated like, you know, Python for people who know Python, but in Portuguese, I think it sounds better and it's shorter.
Yeah.
And so this book pretty much grew out of that course, you know. So it's a book for people who already are using Python, but want to learn to use it better. And how do I propose to help people use it better? To try and explain why the language is the way it is, why it was designed the way it is, you know, how the big pieces fit together. And that's why Fluent Python, I think, was in the first book in the market worldwide that talked about special methods on chapter 1. The first example was about special methods, because I don't think anybody that's learning Python from the first time should start with special methods. But I think anybody that has been using Python for a while needs to understand the special methods, because then a lot of pieces fit together. It's like this, right? Yeah.
We're going to start changing into communities. And another thing I saw that is that you founded a hacker club.
Yes.
But I need help with saying that in Portuguese.
Yes.
Garoa Hacker Club.
Yes, that's pretty good. Yes.
Okay.
It's Garoa.
Garoa.
But it's, yeah, very good. So yeah, Garoa actually means drizzle, you know, this fine rain, which is associated with the city of São Paulo, where I live. São Paulo is known, one of the poetic names of São Paulo is Terra da Garoa, know, the land of the drizzle. Anyway, so Garoa is a hackerspace, and I don't know, I think most people that I meet don't know what a hackerspace is. So a hackerspace is a self-organized community lab. In this case, we rented a house. It's not a big house, it's about, I don't know, 80 or 90 square meters. It's actually pretty small.
Okay, yeah.
But it has a little space outside where we can, you know, cook barbecue sometimes, churrasco, parrillada. Anyway, so the lab, so we rent this house. So we created an association so that we could have a bank account, and we could sign a contract to rent the place. So now there's about 40 or 50 people that pay. There are paying members, but Garoa is an open hackerspace. What that means is that all of our activities are open to anyone who is interested.
Okay.
We publish the activities. Of course, now we are not having activities in the space, right? Because São Paulo, Brazil is one of the worst places in the world for COVID.
Right.
But we're having online activities that we usually did not have before, because we wanted to encourage people to go there. So we avoided online activities.
Okay.
But now we are having them, but hopefully we'll be able to go back to the space. But anyway, so the idea is anybody can come as long as there is a member to open the door. But our members know that our etiquette is anybody that rings the bell, we open the door and welcome them, and they can participate in whatever is going on.
Okay.
So the only privilege that the members have is that the members have the key. Okay. So they don't depend on anybody else to go there. But that's how Garoa is working. But your question was interesting because you asked about what you wish to accomplish.
Yes.
And that's a very good question. I think one of the main things that we as humans need to learn to do better is to organize ourselves in a local, in a smaller scale, because we managed to create big governments, but big governments have lots of problems.
Yes.
No matter if they are left-wing or right-wing governments. And I am not an anarchist, I believe in governments.
Okay.
I don't see how you can manage a pandemic without a society that's well organized and has a government. But I think we also need to learn to organize at a smaller scale. And so for me, the most important project of Garoa is Garoa itself. Is the fact that we've been able to keep that space. This is actually our second space. We started in a smaller place.
Okay.
But for 10 years, we have our own space. We do our own activities. We don't depend on corporate sponsorships or government help in any way. So we are autonomous. We are self-governed, and I like to help prove that this can work. And so we can create a space where people can exchange ideas. We provide infrastructure. Over the years, we have savings. And so we were able to buy equipment like 3D printers and laser cutter and other things, and lots of electronics equipment and tools and machines. So that's the idea. The idea is to create an autonomous space to show people that this can work, that you don't need to wait, for the government to do it for you or for companies to do that for you.
Yeah, or a big company to sponsor your group.
Yes, exactly. We don't need that. You can just go ahead and do it. I think it's very important.
Okay, and what about the Python community? Because I think a lot of people say, like I went for the language and stayed for the community. Yes. In your opinion, what makes the Python community so great?
Well, I think one of the things that when we had our first PyCon Brazil, it caught my attention was the diversity of the topics. So I like the diversity of our community in many dimensions. We need to improve our diversity in several axes. We still don't have a parity, of women that we should have, because the population is pretty much evenly distributed. Also in Brazil, we don't have as many Black people attending our events as there are Black people in the population. But diversity has lots of different axes, and I think one of the axes that Python, of diversity in Python, has to do with the fact that because it's an easy to learn language, it has been adopted by scientists and researchers in many different areas of knowledge. So that by itself brings diversity, right? Because, and then so what I was saying is that I remember one of my first great impressions of our first Brazilian Python conference was the fact that we had lots of talks that were not about web development.
Yes.
You know, even though most of us were employed doing web development, there were people that showed up to talk about uses in science and social research and other areas. So I think that's stimulating for me. I like the fact that now Python is a lot in IoT as well, like, you know, with MicroPython and so on. I remember when a friend of mine, a colleague of mine came, because I was always talking about Python in '98. Nobody knew about it, so I was the crazy guy who was always talking about
Okay.
Python. And then this friend of mine said, "Oh, did you see there's a Python website now in Portuguese made by a Brazilian?" "Oh yeah." So I went to look at it, and it was great. It was a wiki. It was called pythonbrasil.com,
Okay.
I think. And it was a wiki created by this guy called Osvaldo. And Osvaldo is now living in Germany, but I met with him the other day because we were at this online event together. And so I thought, wow, this is great what this guy is doing. That's what I need to do. You know, at the time I was writing a series of Python tutorials for a magazine, but I thought this is, okay, I'm going to continue with the tutorials for the magazine, but this is much better. Do something online and meet more people. And then after a few years, I met Osvaldo in person and other people that we knew from the mailing lists at an event that we used to have in Brazil called FISLI, Fórum Internacional do Software Livre in Porto Alegre. Was very big and attracted lots of people from free software communities. So that's where I met Osvaldo and many other Pythonistas, Érico, who is also in Germany these days, and a lot of other people, and Leonardo, who is one of the reviewers of my book and lives in São Paulo. Anyway, I made lots of friends, and I remember that when there was one of the years at FISLI was at this big expo hall, and there was a fire escape that was a staircase pretty wide, and we decided to meet. We didn't have a room, so we met at the staircase, sitting in the steps.
Okay.
There was about 15 or 20 people from different regions of Brazil that were interested in organizing a Python conference in Brazil. So I remember that moment was very vivid because I knew these people from the mailing list, and now we were becoming friends, and we decided to, you know, we had already built enough trust between ourselves to say, okay, we can found an association so that we can have, you know, a bank account to get sponsorships and pay for a space for a conference. And that's how Python Brazil got organized.
Right. That's the exact same experience for PyCon Latam. We got together in an open space, and that's when we decided to go ahead and organize it.
Cool.
Do you want to talk about your memory or about your book, how it got accepted?
Oh yeah, well, that was. I was accepted to speak in the around 2011 and 2012. I was able to afford going to international conferences just to attend, but I wanted to speak, right? And that was hard. You know, PyCon, for instance, in the US is very competitive because there's many times more submissions than slots. So I submitted several times. I was not accepted. I was accepted for OSCON in 2013. And then while I was there in Portland at OSCON, that's when I had the idea. Oh, of course, I had thought about writing a Python book for many years, but then I had the idea, you know what? I am at a conference organized by O'Reilly. There's a huge O'Reilly booth here and there's editors hanging around in the booth. So I'm going to talk to one of them about my book.
Okay.
So I did a small presentation with 4 slides. I had an iPad, and so I did a four slide presentation. The first one was about me, and the next ones were about the book. And I came up with somebody that I didn't know. Oh, I would like to talk to a publisher, an editor. And then, oh, yeah, talk to her. And then I talked to this woman, I think her name was Laurie Petricki, I think. And so I showed her these slides. I said, that'd be interesting. Oh, please send me by email. And she gave me my card, her card, right? And then I never heard from them for 2 months. And then one day I got this email saying, we want to go ahead and do your book.
Wow.
That was awesome. And it's I like to tell people that Fluent Python was the 4th book that I started, but the first one that I finished.
Okay.
It wasn't, so over a period of like 20 years, I started 3 different books that I never finished. But this time, one of the things was, this is a book with O'Reilly. The other publishers weren't as good. So this is a book with O'Reilly. I just, need to deliver.
Yes.
And it was, that was good. Okay. I also remember another memory that I have is, I think it was 2011, I submitted a talk about the ABC language for a PyCon in the US. ABC was the language in which Guido worked as a contributor before he did Python. And there's a lot of, I studied the language. I bought a couple of books that talk about it, and it's interesting because a lot of things that people immediately recognize as characteristics of Python are actually from ABC. And so I thought it was an interesting talk, but the committee disagreed, so the talk was rejected. But then I submitted it as a poster. Oh, okay. And I did a very different poster because I basically already had the slides, so I printed the slides in A3 format, and I did like this panel connecting with the slides with red tape, so it was kind of a mind map. Okay. Sort of. And then Guido came to see it, which for me was great, because I had never had an opportunity to talk to him, and he came to see it because it was about ABC, and there's actually a video about that somewhere where Guido says a few things about ABC. Yeah.
Wow, that must have been great.
Yes, that was cool. Yeah.
Okay, and what about when we talk about the Latin community? What disadvantages do you see with comparing us to the rest of the world?
Well, I think one disadvantage that we have is that most of us don't learn enough English at home or in school to be able to participate in an international community. So I think that's a disadvantage because we love our native languages, Portuguese and Spanish, Português e Espanhol, pero English is the language of IT, and so that's one thing that we need to overcome. But there's also, I think, advantages. And some advantages that I think we have is, first of all, our countries were colonies, and that has a lot of long-term effects, most of them bad, most of them negative, but there are some positive effects. I think one of the positive effects of being an ex-colony is that I think people from ex-colonies tend to be more open to the world, They are interested in things that come from outside. They are interested in meeting people from outside. They are interested in learning foreign ideas. And I think that's an advantage, because there are people in first world countries that always, were very self-sufficient, so they don't care too much about, the rest of the world.
Right.
And the other advantage that I think we have is a geographical one, because there's even before the pandemic, there was a lot of opportunity for remote work. I know many programmers in Latin America who work in their own countries, but work for companies in Europe or the US, right? That's an arrangement that works pretty well, because the exchange rate is usually favorable. And our geography is very good for that, because we are kind of in the middle. Our time zones are between Europe and the US.
Yeah.
So that's a very good strategic advantage that we have. Yeah.
Great. I really like that you never mention like skills or ability to learn, because that's something that we all have. That's not even an advantage of disadvantage, because we're capable of performing at the highest level. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm really glad that you didn't talk about that at all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think all humans are capable of performing at the highest levels, if only they get the opportunity.
Yeah.
There was I don't remember whose name it was, but there was an American sociologist, I think, that when supposedly when Einstein died, he donated his brain to science.
Yeah.
And this sociologist said, I don't find studying the morphology of Einstein's brain nearly as important as it is to understand how many Einsteins we lost because they spent their whole lives, cutting sugarcane.
Right, exactly. At the moment of this recording is kind of the same timeline as PyCon Latam 2020 was supposed to begin.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so due to everything that's going on in the world, it's postponed. But do you have a topic in mind for what would have been your keynote at PyCon Latam?
Yes. So I think I don't know. You probably follow me on Twitter. Sometimes people hear me writing. Well, people see me writing, complaining about the Python type hints.
Yeah.
But it's actually, I want to say that I understand the needs that the type hints feel for a part of the community, not all of the community, okay? Because, for instance, for people learning to program for the first time, for scientists, for data analysts, type hints don't help a lot. Type hints are really useful for software engineers, but like I said before, I think one of the best things about the Python community is that we are not a community only of software engineers, right? Mm-hmm. So type hints are great for software engineers, people who work full-time as programmers. That's what they do. They are not social scientists. They are not architects. They're not anything else. They are just full-time programmers. And that's great, and type hints is great for them. But so I think we have to be careful about, so I've been giving talks about type hints. The one that I gave in English, the title was Type Hints, Take It Easy.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, that's, I'm sad that we didn't get to see that talk right now, but at the same time, I want to see where it goes. Because yes, as a stand-up programmer, I'm sure it's going to end up different than where it is today.
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay, Luciano, for starting to close this video, mm-hmm, do you have a message for our Latin community? On the last year, the majority of the people going to the conference had never had the experience of going to a very big conference, so they didn't exactly knew what to expect. So I'm guessing that next year, the people are going to be high expectations of presenters or the relationships they're going to make. So you have a closing message for all of them?
Well, I think it's fantastic that you are doing this conference that is a conference to bring together people in the Python community from all of Latin America. I think we needed that. I don't know if it was me or if it was just I was in the room, but I consider myself a contributor to the idea of having the Spanish charlas in the in the US PyCon. I thought that would be a good idea for inclusion, you know. Oh yeah, Naomi Cedar. So Naomi Naomi was the main driving force behind the PyCon charlas.
Yeah.
And she's awesome. She's great. But I think PyCon Latam is also a great idea. And I am looking forward to be there. I don't want to promise that I will be there into 2021. Nobody knows what's going to happen with this pandemic. I have 3 asterisks for risk conditions related to the COVID. So I'm going to take care of myself, you know. I love to travel, but until I feel, you know, 100% safe, I'm not going to be traveling. So, but what I wanted to say, besides the fact that I think PyCon Latam is a great idea, and I hope to be able to join you in person. I also think that we need to grow our communities from the bottom up. Okay. Because international travel is very expensive. A lot of people, you know, most Brazilian Pythonistas can't afford international travel. And it's also not very good for the environment. Okay. But you know, but the most important thing is that I think we need to encourage people to organize at a local level, you know. So I think the best thing that I would like to see would be for, you know, in 5 or 10 years to have each medium city in Latin America to have their own active user group with regular meetings, with workshops, you know. It's amazing how PyLadies, for instance, PyLadies and also AfroPython was created in Brazil as a sort of like PyLadies, but organizing for events for the Black community. And I think we need more of that, not only, you know, for those groups that are underrepresented, but also regional, you know, to have meetups in more cities, because we can connect with people around the world like we are doing now online. Yeah. But it's the opportunity of, you know, meeting people in person, participating in a workshop in person or a little sprint. It's completely different. Then it's much easier to create real friendships, and real friendships also help our careers, right? Because we learn about opportunities. And so that's my message. I think we should try and find ways of encouraging people by example. I think this is how we do it, okay? I was one of the founders of the São Paulo Python users group. Okay. And so we need to, you know, make it happen. It doesn't matter if the first meetings there's only 3 or 5 or 5 people. But if you do it regularly, you know, then eventually you get something that is durable, and that's awesome. That's what I would like to okay. That's my main message, for people to organize local Python events. Yeah, and I think that's exactly what you say. The success of a group is consistency. Yes, so exactly. Be local and be consistent, and your community will grow. Yes, totally. Okay. Exactly. Well, thank you very much for your time, for your knowledge, and for sharing with all of us. And yeah, be careful, take care of yourself, and I hope to see you in PyCon Latam 2021. Katja, it was a pleasure to meet you and
You too.
to collaborate with you through email. You sent me a wonderful briefing to be prepared for this, and I just wish you luck, and I hope we can meet in person,
Yeah,
not in the not too distant future.
yeah.
Bye
Likewise.
bye.
Thank you very
Ciao.
much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.